In the dead of night, on a cold December evening in 2012, the streets of Delhi witnessed a crime so brutal it shook the very conscience of our nation. A young woman full of life and dreams was subjected to unimaginable horrors. She was called Nirbhaya. The Nirbhaya case was not just another crime, it was a turning point. It awakened a sleeping nation, sparking outrage, sorrow, and an unyielding demand for justice. The country stood united as thousands took to the streets, their voices echoing with one powerful cry: justice for Nirbhaya. This was the moment when India as a whole said, enough is enough. The world watched as the people of this country came together, demanding change, demanding safety, and demanding justice. But amidst the outcry, a question loomed large. A question that remains unanswered to this day. Why is it that some cases like Nirbhaya's ignite a firestorm of media attention and public outrage, while others are buried, forgotten, or ignored? Is it justice we seek, or is it something else that drives the spotlight? What happens when the crimes against women are used not for justice but for political gain? From 2012 to 2024, the landscape of our nation has transformed in ways that are unimaginable. The streets that once echoed the cries for justice have grown quieter. The wounds of the past remain unhealed. Those who once led the charge, raising their voices against the brutalities faced by Nirbhaya, now find themselves in the very seats of power they once opposed. In the years that followed, the same leaders who had borne the flags of justice and righteousness rode the wave of public sentiment to victory in 2014 and again in 2019. They spoke of new beginnings, of new India, of defeating powerful opponents in their own bastions as they ascended to the pinnacle of power. And while the world moved on, Nirbhaya's story continued to haunt the nation. It took 8 long years before her culprits were finally brought to justice. 8 years of waiting, of reliving the horror, until the dawn of 2020 saw them hanged, offering a semblance of closure to a grieving family and a scarred nation. In the midst of all this, our legal system too saw a transformation. The Indian Penal Code, a cornerstone of our justice system for over a century, was scrapped in 2024. In its place, a new framework was born, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, promising a fresh approach to justice. But can a new law alone heal the deep-seated wounds of this nation? Can it erase the pain and fear that still grips the hearts of women across the country? Amidst all these changes, political shifts, new laws, and evolving leadership, one thing has remained constant: the crimes. The brutalities against women never stopped. They persisted year after year, year after year, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and broken spirits. But as the crimes continued, something else began to emerge: a pattern, a disturbing inconsistency. The cases that garnered the spotlight and dominated the headlines were more often than not from states where the BJP was in opposition. These stories were amplified, dissected, and debated across every news channel, fueling public outrage and protests. Yet, in BJP-ruled states, even graver or more brutal crimes faded into the shadows, barely registering a blip on the media's radar. These were crimes that should have shocked the nation, should have sparked the same outcry and demands for justice, but instead, they were met with silence. In the years following Nirbhaya, India witnessed some of the most horrific crimes against women. Crimes that, for all their brutality, received scant attention. In 2018, an 8-year-old girl from nomadic tribe in Kathua, Jammu and Kashmir, was brutally raped and murdered inside a temple. The horror of this crime shook the conscience of the nation. But the focus quickly shifted to the political affiliations of those involved, obscuring the fight for justice. In another case in 2017, a young woman in Unnao, Uttar Pradesh was raped by powerful BJP MLA Kuldeep Singh Sengar. Her relentless pursuit of justice was met with threats, intimidation, and eventually the tragic death of her father in police custody. Despite the severity of the case, it struggled to maintain media's attention. In another case in Hathras, Uttar Pradesh, a 19-year-old Dalit girl was gang raped and left paralyzed by upper caste men in 2020. the case gained brief attention, only to be overshadowed by authorities' mishandling, including the late-night cremation of her body without the family's consent. The outrage was fleeting, and the story quickly disappeared from the headlines. In 2021, a 12-year-old Dalit girl was brutally raped and murdered in Gujarat. Despite the horrific nature of the crime, the incident barely made a ripple in the national media, and the demands of justice were largely ignored. These are just a few examples of the countless tragedies that took place in BJP-ruled states. Crimes that should have united the nation in outrage, that should have been met with the same fervor and determination as Nirbhaya's case. But instead, they were met with silence. This silence speaks volume about the selective outrage that plagues our society. Amidst the constant flow of crimes, this inconsistency is glaring. When justice is politicized, when the lives of women become tools for political gain, the very fabric of our society is torn apart. We must ask ourselves, why does the spotlight only shines when it suits those in power? And who pays the price when the lights go out? But as we dissect this pattern of selective outrage, we cannot overlook one of the most glaring and disturbing examples: the case of Bilkis Bano, a young woman who survived one of the most horrific acts of brutality during the 2002 Gujarat riots, only to see her fight for justice tarnished by the very people who claim to stand for righteousness. In 2022, after years of legal battles and a hard-won victory that saw her rapists and the murderers of her family convicted, Bilkis Bano's tormentors were released from prison. Not only were they set free, but they were welcomed back with garlands, as if they were heroes returning from a noble battle. Where was the conscience of those in power then? Where was the outcry? Why did this crime, so brutal, so heart-wrenching, failed to ignite the same storm of outrage? Why did it not dominate the airwaves, the social media feeds, the very streets that are being filled with protests selectively? Was it because the crime took place in a BJP-ruled state? Was it because the convicts were from the right side of the political divide? As the BJP and its leaders today amplify the failures of other governments, let us not forget how they turned a blind eye to the suffering of Bilkis Bano. How they not only allowed but celebrated the release of her culprits. In a nation that claims to seek justice, how could this have happened without a wave of public outrage? Where did the conscience of the nation go? Why did this injustice not become the storm that challenged the very core of the ruling power? In this selective game of outrage and silence, it is the pursuit of justice that is lost. And as long as we allow politics to dictate when and where we raise our voices, true justice will remain a distant dream for the women of this country. As we surf through the shadows of selective outrage, we arrive at the latest tragedy that has gripped the nation: the R.J. Kar Hospital rape and murder case. A crime so heinous, it has sparked not only horror and disgust, but also fierce anger against the state government led by Mamata Banerjee. Once again, the BJP finds itself in the opposition. And once again, the spotlight burns the brightest on a state where they do not hold power. The crime took place within the walls of a place meant for healing, a place where lives are saved, not stolen. A young woman was brutally raped and murdered within R.J. Kar Hospital in Kolkata, sending shockwaves through the community and beyond. As details of the case emerged, so too did the anger. Protests erupted, not just against the perpetrators of this horrific act, but also against the state government. The public's outrage was unrelenting, demanding accountability for those in power. Once again, the BJP in opposition seized the moment, amplifying the cries for justice, turning the spotlight squarely to the failures of the Mamata Banerjee-led government. The outrage is justified. The pain and anger are real. But as we witness this familiar pattern, where crimes in non-BJP ruled states receive an overwhelming surge of attention, we must ask ourselves, why is this outrage so selective? Why do similar or more brutal crimes in BJP ruled states not receive the same level of scrutiny and the same demand for justice? The R.J. Kar Hospital case is tragic, and it deserves every ounce of attention and demands for justice. But when the focus becomes more about who is in power rather than the crime itself, we must question the true motives behind this outrage. Is it the crime that matters, or is it the opportunity to score political points? In a just society, every crime should be met with the same level of outrage, regardless of where it happens or who is in power. But as long as the outrage remains selective, as long as the spotlight shines only when it serves the political purpose, the cycle of injustice will continue. And it is the women of this country who will pay the price. As we stand in 2024, we are left to ponder. Has anything truly changed? The names and faces in power may have shifted. New laws may have been written. But the question remains, are women any safer today than they were 12 years ago? Or have we simply replaced one form of injustice with another? As crime against women continue to rise, we must ask ourselves again, where is the outcry in all other cases that were silenced? Where is the justice that was once demanded with such fervor? Let us be clear, our intention is not to discredit the protests or the righteous calls for justice. Every voice raised against injustice matters, and every demand for accountability is vital. But we must ask, why is this outreach so selective? Who decides which tragedies will be amplified and why? And how are these moments of pain and loss being turned into tools for political gain? Until we confront these questions, true justice will remain elusive. The cycle of selective outrage will continue to divide us.